Hey, if you are done living by rules that don't serve you, hit a like, drop a comment, and subscribe. This mindset. Okay, hey, this is Francisca, and this is my Crisis Life, and this is this week's Monday Mindset. Okay, so I don't really want this to be like over political, right? But at the same time, it kind of is a little bit political. So, yesterday in Crisis Confessionals, I was talking about how the system handles mental health, how schools support children with mental health, and how they talk a lot about looking after them, but they don't really. And I think it just got me to think a lot about kind of like this level of like systemic pressure that everybody, particularly in the Western world, faces. And this kind of need to be in the rat race. You know, there are people in London that pay like £1,500 a month to send their children to nursery to earn the money to pay for the childcare. It's crazy. But we're taught that this is what life is, right? You go to school, you learn, you get good grades, you take your exams, you do well in your exams, you get into further education, you get into higher education, you finish your university career, you work really hard on that, and that's the place where you get to experiment and you get to be an individual and you're learning things that are really specific to you and to what you like, but not really because there are just courses that are generic in an area that you just happen to be good at school. And then, you get a job and then, you spend a little time at your job and then you meet someone, you get married and then you have kids and then you go on holiday once a year to Benidorm or Mallorca or whatever the fuck, right? This is what we're taught. And this is kind of the blueprint, I think, for most people's lives. And I know particularly when I decided that I was leaving the country, everybody was like, she's lost her mind. Like, did you hear what Fran's doing? Like, is she okay? Are you okay, Fran? What is going on? What is going on that you're making this really dangerous, risky decision that does not conform with everything that society says that you should be? Like, what if you die? What if your kids die? What if there's a war in Costa Rica? They don't have an army. They disbanded it to give better education and social care and medical care to the people that live there, their citizens. What are you going to do, Fran? This is not okay. And it's like stepping outside of that, I think for a lot of people is just so fucking mind-blowing that it is actually physically scary. Like, so there is this level of systemic pressure for us to behave a certain way. And I think about where that comes from, right? That comes from the way that we are taught as kids in school. Like, it's mental to me, right? Kids are taught to take in information and then regurgitate that information using words and phrases that they've been taught to regurgitate. And yes, I understand that there are positives about education. I'm not saying education is a load of bullshit. Like, yes, they do talk and they think and it gives them access to information that maybe they had never, would never have got previously. Like, okay, amazing. I'm highly educated. I like to learn. I love to read, right? But essentially, it's just a regurgitation of information. There isn't really much free thought. There isn't really much space for challenge. There isn't really much space for like real actual debate and real radical truth about the things that we're learning about. You couldn't go to school and say, well, actually, I watched this podcast last night that says to me this, that, and the other, or whatever, right? Like, you couldn't go into science and start talking about flat earth theory or write about it in your exams. You wouldn't get any points. I'm not saying that I'm a supporter or not supporter of flat earth theory. I'm just saying that it goes against the grain. It goes against the system, right? Do you know why classrooms were set up the way that they were, in lines? Because back in the Victorian time, I don't know, maybe before that, I'm not one for dates and specifics, but I know that it was set up like that so that children could be prepared for factory work. So they could be prepared for taking orders, for not thinking, for not having any critical evaluation of what's going on, but just doing what they're told and doing it in a rote manner. This is why education was set up like this. Do you know that we have in England, we have like a core curriculum, English, maths and science. These are the things, 3 things that are deemed essential, that every single child has to do no matter what. When they were putting the core curriculum in, they wrote to the citizens of the UK and said, which subjects do you feel are the most important for our children to learn? And they came up with all sorts of different answers. I couldn't name them all now. I learned this when I was in uni, right? Came up with all different answers. And the government said, oh, that's really, really interesting. Yeah, we're going to make it maths, English and science. Why is it maths, English and science? Because these are the things that progress in a very aggressive way the country to make the most amount of money, to be on top of the Forex, to create the biggest amount of exports and whatever else, right? This is why we think these things are important. Not because we actually think that they're important to our learning or to our development or to our human growth or our, just being people in the world. It's insane. It's, for me, more about people being commodities, people having a price tag on their head about how much of a commodity are you to the country. And it shows now because there's privatisation, massive privatisation of schools here in the UK, and they're all under the guise of academies, but academies are run like businesses. So the business either makes money or doesn't. It makes profit or it doesn't. And the children are literally valued based on how much profit, what is their ROI, like what is their return on investment. And the children that maybe are not as smart, not as academically minded, or have differing needs, varying needs, the investment isn't put into them. They say that they're doing it, but really anybody that has a disabled child or a child who's slightly different has tried to get services from the UK, you know how little there is to offer, right? Other than a pat on the back and you're doing really good and we recognise that your child needs some help. Good luck with that. In social work we talk about this idea of somebody being a contributing member of society. And I think sometimes, what exactly does that mean? And I think the older that I'm getting, the more that I'm realising actually to be a contributing member of society, you have to be valued in the areas that are going to make the most amount of money for your country. You have to be a commodity. It's like, are you a contributing commodity in this society? So here's the thing, right? I would love to change the system. I would love to change the system that we're in that considers people beyond their economic value. I'm not necessarily calling for revolution. I mean, I might be a little bit, right? But not right this second. I'm not necessarily calling for revolution, but I am calling for a sense of rebellion. And you know why? Because I feel like healing is rebellion. Healing yourself and stepping away from the mass consensus, this mass agreement that we all have about how things are going to be and how we're going to show up and what we're going to do and all the rest of it, stepping away from that and focusing on yourself, on the broken parts of yourself that aren't really just broken. They're not broken, right? They're just trying to fit into what everybody else is saying that we should be. And then when we don't, it's very difficult for us. It's challenging and it's heartbreaking, right? When ironically, actually, a lot of the fucking trauma that we're dealing with has been created by the broken society that we live in, right? But I really do feel like if we can focus on ourselves and we can focus on our own healing, then one by one, that will have a ripple effect out into the rest of the world. And there will be a shift in focus. And I see it's already happening. There'll be a shift in focus from, I've got to be a good kid. I've got to do well. I've got to do well in my exams. I've got to get a good job. This is the only way that we can do things. This is the only way that I can feel of any value. To actually, what is my purpose and what is my value? And how do I develop that to the best of my ability as a unique and purposeful individual? And then, how does that allow me to connect to my community and serve my community in that way, not be a commodity within my society? So yeah, that's my rant, my very non-political rant. If that's something that you're interested in, come back tomorrow in Chrysalis Tools. We're going to do a little meditation, like a little bit of practice to support with that detachment from societal norms, from societal pressures, from systemic pressure, to allow us to focus a little more on what we need as individuals, as communities. Okay, yeah, I think that's it. Okay, so if that landed, drop us something in the comments and tell me, what's one blueprint you're ready to burn? And come back tomorrow. I've got a Chrysalis Tools meditation to help you start detaching from all this systemic pressure.